This is DUNE TALK, a DuneNewsNet.com production. Join us now for the latest Dune news, reactions, and lively discussions.
Hello, Dune Nation. A fresh Dune Part 2 trailer has arrived, so it's time for reactions from all of the crew. This is Marcus, your editor at DuneNewsNet.com, and I'm looking forward to discuss this new footage with Garin and Chani. Hey guys, less than 2.5 months left to go.
Hey, it's Garin. I know I'm calm on the exterior, but inside I am screaming, raving, excited, and you're going to find out why when we start digging into it. So, welcome.
Hey everyone, thanks again for joining us. I'm not going to add too much to that. Garin, his sentiments are mine, so really excited about this episode. These don't come around too often, these episodes where we talk about a trailer, because you only get 2 or 3 trailers for each of these movies. So, and this may be the last one, who knows? But yeah, plenty to react to and dive into today. I'm excited.
Okay, it's time for trailer talk.
Dune Movie News.
The first week of December saw 2 exciting Dune Part 2 events taking place in Brazil and South Korea, with many people seeing the movie's first 10 minutes. Warner Brothers then teased that a new trailer was coming, and indeed on the 12th, there it was, official trailer 3. So let's hear those first reactions. Johnny, kick us off tonight with your overall thoughts from watching this third trailer.
Yeah, definitely a lot of thoughts is the first thing I would say. I absolutely loved it. I think about halfway through, when we really get some of the very first major worm action, I was like, wow, this is like actually happening right now. And this is like, it's just how you would imagine it in the book. And for people, I only read the book for the first time like 5 years ago, I think, at this point. And I can't even imagine for people that have read it, 10, 20, or more years ago. And seen and lived through, some of these other adaptations. I think it's just going to be pretty surreal. In this trailer, it felt like I was, in a good way, it felt like almost like I was watching the movie. Like I couldn't believe how good it was. And it's not just the worms; it's the music and the non-action sequences, just some of the quieter character moments and the way it's all shot. And I can't wait to just really dive into it. We talked about it on the last episode, but just being able to dive into this world and stay there for 2.5+ hours, that's like what it's all about. So I'm excited to talk more in depth about this and hear the guys' reactions today, because we haven't actually talked about it too much.
Yeah, so I saw this trailer, this third trailer, and I kind of had a moment that reminded me of the same experience I had when I first saw Fellowship of the Ring, because I read those Tolkien's books when I was a young kid, and I remember describing with my friends, wouldn't it be cool if one day they could depict all of this, especially all the battle sequences that happen in Return of the King. But I knew at that time it just couldn't be done. And I had sort of that same moment of realization that this story that I've loved for so many years, most of my life actually, was literally being described and depicted in a way that felt so real. I just was like ecstatic. Kind of like Johnny, I was like, is this really happening? Does this really look as accurate and have the emotional impact and excitement that I remember feeling years ago with Lord of the Rings? So I'm just kind of in awe that this vision of an epic war movie and making the second half of the book come to life. It's just, I just can't even imagine the level of detail they have gone into, the amount of work that the visual effects and every aspect of the production had to put into this. It's almost overwhelming, but it's just amazing.
Yeah, for me, this trailer feels really like an expansion of the first 2. We got to see a lot of the same moments, but a bit longer for a different angle. The narrative is similar, but this time we really see a clearer picture of Paul and Chani's relationship. They're growing closer, but we see how, due to the prophecy, they're both facing a lot of internal conflicts together with pressure from the outside. And what's really intriguing here is that we get also more of a sense of Paul's visions and how some of the things that we're seeing here are potentially just one of the possible futures and not, what was actually going to happen. So that's really interesting to see how all that plays out in the final movie. And I think the other trailers already did a good job of this already, but this certainly ups the ante in terms of showcasing the scale of the movie. It's not that any of us Dune people really need to see more, but at this point, this is really looking to remind broader movie-going audiences of, this is coming in March. It's coming really soon. And there are really shots here that could convince almost anyone, even if they haven't seen the movie or they have no prior interest in Dune, to really head to the theater for an epic cinematic experience. Let's go ahead and explore some of this trailer's highlights, especially the new shots that we got to see now. And although we're going into details now, we will be avoiding spoilers on this episode. Of course, you can look forward to our usual scene-by-scene breakdown in another upcoming show. So, Garin, in our previous episodes, we talked about Villeneuve's comments to the effect of this being an epic war movie, as you just mentioned. And this trailer is certainly action-packed. War is erupting all over Arrakis, and I'm sure you're pleased to see the high levels of Ornithopter activity going on. What are your thoughts on these various sequences, which appear to be happening at different points of the movie?
Yeah, super excited that, in fact, there was a moment a few months ago where I think we talked about it on one of our shows, what would be the role of Thopters in part 2? And for me, if Thopters had not been an integral part of the epic war sequences, I would have been sorely disappointed, devastated, as a matter of fact. But see from this trailer, in fact, if you look at the trailer at 2 minutes and 20 seconds in, there's a classic scene where you've got Sardaukar on the plains of, I'm assuming, Arrakeen, running to the right, and you've got a whole host of ornithopters flying and firing salvos, moving to the left of the screen. And again, this is the imagery that I was hoping for. If you're gonna show these epic battles that actually were not described in great detail by Frank Herbert, which we've talked about before, but I knew Villeneuve would want to depict these because it's such an opportunity to create such action and intensity, and to up the scale of what's at stake in this battle going on, which we can talk about in more detail later. But yeah, just super excited. We did see some shots of a group of Thopters firing missiles, at an outcropping of rock. We saw that, I think, in the second trailer. Still just an awesome sequence. I love just the detail that they've put into the explosions and the fire and everything. It just feels so authentic. And obviously, I have gone to a place where I've suspended any disbelief, right? When I see these sequences and I see these shots, those ornithopters in my mind's eye, they're real. They feel real. They have the weight, the movement, and so just being able to see some glimpses of what could be described or shown on such an epic scale when we see the full film, just super excited, because I just, again, I've said this so many times, but it's so refreshing, right, to have this new type of vehicle, an ornithopter, which is, sort of this helicopter-esque type vehicle, and now to have these things integrated with weaponry, and they're in the midst of battle. And I just, I always wanted this to happen, and I'm seeing it now. So glad we've got lots of ornithopter shots. And then probably my favorite shot in this trailer number 3 is the one where you see the Fremen on top of riding a sandworm moving to the right of the screen. And then you see, I think it's 3 or 4 thopters moving to the left of the screen, and one of them explodes in midair. And I mean, I'm just like, this could not get any better. I just am like, I'm so glad they included that in the trailer. Like, I felt like they included that for me. It just, that sequence, being able to see because now the audience that hasn't read the book, they're seeing now this, this desert power. They're seeing it on screen, and it's going to be overwhelming, and I just am so glad they've included it. So yeah, just Loving the Thopter shots, guys.
And Garin, I wanted to touch on one thing you mentioned about in the book. Frank Herbert doesn't actually describe that much of the action, right? A lot of it happens off screen, but of course, for a cinematic experience, these are really epic shots. There's a lot that can be conveyed to the audiences through like all the new technologies. But do you have any concern? And Johnny, I want to hear from you as well after that, like the focus on action, as mentioned, that Villeneuve is saying that there's going to be a lot more action, that this could take away from the other elements of the story?
No, is the short quick answer to that. I just think, I don't even really understand that concern, frankly. I think that mainly comes from a thought process of people who've read the book, are familiar with the book, and know that, as you've kind of both pointed out, that Frank Herbert doesn't have a lot of description or write in detail about these action sequences, or especially this big battle we're seeing at the end. So it's unusual, or maybe even jarring, to see them actually take place on screen. But if you know that you're getting a big budget Dune movie adaptation, there's gonna be action, and there's gonna be what is in the book, even if it takes place off screen or off the page. That's going to be in there, because that's going to be not just something that is spectacle and puts people in the theater and sells tickets, but I think to understand the story and how people are getting from point A to point B, and how the story is actually evolving, the narrative, I think you have to actually see these things, because it's a different medium. You need to understand the geography of it, the violence of it. Like it's something that I think I was excited to see. Although part of me, in some way, even though I don't know why, because I trust Villeneuve so much as an artist and a filmmaker, is he never really done anything like this before. I mean, we've seen him do action sequences, set pieces, especially in Dune Part 1. That's really his biggest stuff he's ever done. And we saw a little bit of action like in Blade Runner 2049, for example. But I mean, this is a whole nother level. And Garin made the reference to the Lord of the Rings, and that's something that gets compared to Dune pretty often. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely on the scale. I mean, the only Hollywood blockbuster like action, like battle sequences I can think of like this century that compared to like what we're seeing in this trailer is the Lord of the Rings in the Two Towers, Helm's Deep, and then Return of the King, of course. And for me, and I know these films are a little bit more divisive, but like Avatar, for example, the battle at the end of the first film, which is like 25, 30 minutes, like nonstop, incredibly staged, incredibly shot, great storytelling. And the battle at the end of the second movie too, which is also incredibly well done. And I'm a big fan of those movies. This looks, I mean, just the camera movements we're seeing in this trailer, it's just like unbelievable and breathtaking. I knew Villeneuve had it in him, but to actually see it come to fruition, that's like it doesn't feel real still, and it probably won't feel real until I actually see the movie a couple times. So yeah, I think Garrett made some great points and pointed out some of my favorite moments, especially those shots and those movements where things are heading like opposite directions, and there's all these different moving objects, vehicles and soldiers and worms and dust, and it's so enormous, and I don't know how. There's so many reasons why it shouldn't work, and I understand that's why maybe a lot of the book readers were concerned about it coming to life, but it looks like it works, and it looks even better than I hoped it would be, frankly.
If I can just add to that, Johnny, bringing up Avatar, one of the successes I think of James Cameron is his attention to detail. And when you have a visionary director like Villeneuve or Cameron, and they have the budget to do it, it's just a match made in heaven, because you've got someone with a vision that wants to show so much detail that creates that realism. Um, for instance, just another shot that I was talking about with the ornithopters going over the sandworm. Just the speed that you're seeing the ornithopters going in one direction, the Fremen on the sandworm going in the other direction. just the attention to the dust movement and the speed of the missiles being fired, just all of that is so important to creating that feeling of realism. And you're because I remember Villeneuve saying this early on. He wanted the Dune experience to be rooted in what we know, to be relatable to us in our world here and the experiences that we've had, so that it feels real. Like he talked about, spent a year designing, the worm and how it needed to feel ancient, but yet incredibly powerful. And it's so just I love the fact that the attention to detail is manifest just in this third trailer, in such detail. And and I agree with you, Johnny. I know that Villeneuve is cognizant of, this is about characters that we love. We are in it with these characters on all sides of the conflict. He knows how to tell a story and not have have the action overwhelm the character arc and development. So I'm not worried, but we're excited to go and see the action too, because it's an integral part of the story. So I just think it's going to be the right balance. I'm just convinced of it.
Real quick, I know Marcus probably gonna speed us along here, but I totally agree with you in terms of like James Cameron. He's a visionary. Whatever you want to say about him as a person or him as his films, the stories that he chooses to do, um, which I love. By and large, he has such attention to detail, and he's so brilliant in terms of Avatar, for example. I was mentioning those battles. I mean, of course, it's like a almost entirely CG world and characters and everything, but the weight, as you mentioned, and the speed and the physics of how that all comes together, that's what makes it look so good. That's what makes it feel so different versus something you might see in like just an anonymous comic book movie, for example, or some disaster movie in Hollywood. Like it's just a different level. Like when you see it, you know what it feels and looks like, and it's just hard to top because it's someone that can tell a great story, and all this other great action, the visuals, the effects is like a cherry on top, basically. And it's not even like it's not about it just being photo real or anything like that, even though Dune by and large does look very realistic. But that weight, that speed, it making sense in your brain and not feeling, uncanny. I think it's hard to kind of articulate that sometimes, especially when we criticize, Marvel movies or whatever the latest blockbuster is. But you can see the Dune trailer and it in your back of your brain somewhere, it clicks. For me anyway, and I feel like for a lot of people. And Villeneuve is someone who his storytelling has always been fantastic, but that's never taken away from his visuals in his films, no matter what the budget is. And I think that is still the case with Dune Part One, and so far what we've seen from Dune Part Two.
Yeah, and as you've been mentioning, it does seem that everything is building towards this grand finale that is going to be like a scene that's going to take place over, probably an extended part of the movie's runtime, especially if you include the final scene after that at the in the hallway at Arrakeen. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a huge confrontation that's taking place on the plains of Arrakeen. You have the Imperium Sardaukar forces and the Fremen. And we see that shot of the Emperor's ship entering the atmosphere and then his tent-shaped forward base. We get to see that a few more times here from a different angle. Garin, what are your thoughts on this setting where this final battle is going to take place?
Yeah, so the final battle is actually not necessarily described in the action conflict in Frank Herbert's book, but some of the set pieces are described quite well. And I was struck by how just even 15 or so seconds into this third trailer, there's actually a shot that I can tell is zeroed in on the side of the Emperor's mobile tent, which becomes his base during the war. And just the level of detail and thought that has gone into how the physics could even work of having these huge metal pieces kind of unfold. Again, these are things that, as a longtime fan of the book, this is really quite important. Getting the Emperor's base and this mobile metal tent thing right, and I again, we always compare it to the '84 movie, but the way that they've shown me just these two shots in this third trailer, it's like it feels right. It just feels like this is the way it could work, and it's massive. It's on a massive scale, and credit to the filmmakers in the early '80s, right? They didn't have this level of CGI technology and computing power to create this stuff, but just seeing this metal tent and having it appear real is just so inspiring to me. I know that seems a little dumb to say it like that, but again, it's like these are elements of the story that are critical to us fans. And seeing again that level of detail and making it right and feel realistic and have the physics work is really important to me. Also buying into the character interaction and the development and the conflict of the characters. Those elements for me have got to be right, or it takes me out of the moment. My disbelief enters in, and I'm like, oh, man, that wasn't quite right. It's kind of goofy, and but as far as this trailer is showing me, I don't know if I'm going to experience that at all in 2 hours and 46.
When it comes to the visuals, absolutely nothing can top the sight of the Fremen riding into battle on those gigantic sandworms. Duke Leto, he sought the desert power when he took the call to bring House Atreides to Arrakis, and that's the greatest possible manifestation of that. I mean, that scene with the 3 sandworms, that's no doubt the film's money shot. The perfect encapsulation of the story's more fantastical elements. Most people seeing this will immediately recognize that this comes from Dune. Even if they know nothing else from the story, that this is something that they'll recognize. And going to the point about CGI, I do know that the designers did mention in a lot of these cases, these worms are being used. There's practical effects coming into play because, of course, in the first movie, we know that they mentioned it was all CGI, and they put it together some segments of the worm to test how it works. But apparently, here in this second movie, there's going to be a lot more of that. So that's pretty impressive to see how that comes together. I'm sure it will be a great behind the scenes segment as well. And what I also love about this is a direct homage to John Schoonherr's artwork, and he's one of the original artists who illustrated Frank Herbert's Dune novel. And you probably know what I'm talking about, that older illustration of the 3 sandworms coming into battle.
Yes, that artwork definitely popped into my mind when I saw that frame, which is just like, it's so absurdly good. Like I know we're gushing over, like we're fanboying, but yeah, when I say it's accurate or truthful or exactly what you would have imagined, like that's what I'm talking about, is those classic illustrations, which they're very much an interpretation. And that's the thing that we've talked about constantly, is Frank Herbert doesn't offer an expansive amount of description necessarily of any particular elements, designs, anything like that, colors. The description he uses is fairly sparse, so it leaves a lot of room for interpretation. Doesn't invalidate anything necessarily. And that Garin was talking about the tent. That's such an interesting, hard to kind of grasp vehicle or structure, whatever you want to call it. And it does seem like it's been done well here. And in terms of the worm, I was just thinking out to myself when you said that. The first picture we get of them from behind the scenes of like standing on a worm, like segment or whatever the case is, like that's going to be a pretty cool a visual, I think. And I'm excited to see. We're a ways away, obviously, from release, but the behind the scenes stuff, as usual, I think is going to be pretty awesome to see for this.
One thing that is going to be a careful balance is making sure that, and this is where Joe Walker has proven his incredible talent and gift, but the pacing of keeping these character pieces like the Chani and Paul relationship, making sure that pacing feels right, that's developing at the right cadence, and then interspersing that obviously with the Harkonnen and the Emperor plans within plans, and their ability to keep control and wipe out the opposition of Paul and the Fremen. But that's a really hard thing to do, to make sure that as an audience we're not getting worn out in an epic war. I think if you've seen war movies, sometimes we get a little bit lost in the action. There has to be this really careful balance. So, for instance, my wife is not a science fiction fan. She does not like science fiction movies. She really liked Dune, and at first I thought she was just saying that to me because I'm a Dune fan, and I'm like, honey, I need you to be totally honest with me. She's like, honestly, Garin, the first time I did not know what was going on. It was beautiful and the music was amazing. I just didn't get it. I didn't get the characters. But the second time, she walked out of there. We saw it on the IMAX, of course. And as we walked out, she was like, I really liked that. And then she wanted to watch it again at home a couple days later. And so the idea of having someone like her be able to experience part two and have the war sequences meld and dovetail well with the character development. I just hope that's done at the right balance and the right ratio, if you know what I'm saying, because that could get a little off kilter, and then people like my wife are getting worn out. They're maybe getting fatigued because this is a little bit too much to take in. And maybe the first time we watch part two, she will be the same way she was the first time watching part one. But maybe going back that second time, then it'll all fit together for her. But I just sometimes think of the different types of audiences that are going to see this film, and I that's just a thought, an opinion.
Moving on to the other scenes. So all eyes may be on Arrakis, but we do get to see more of the other factions on their worlds, including House Krino on Kaitain. So there's more of Emperor Shaddam IV, and he's learned of the existence of the prophet on Arrakis. And at this point, it's quite likely that he doesn't know who this prophet could be, but maybe he suspects some things. But remember that House Krino, the Emperor, and House Harkonnen, they conspire together to eliminate House Atreides. And then as a result of that, House Harkonnen, they took control of Arrakis again. So they're in charge there. But it seems at this point the emperor can't rely on them anymore. Like, he's seeing that they're not being able to handle whatever the situation is on Arrakis from the things he's hearing. So he's basically trying to take matters into his own hands there. So good to see more of Christopher Walken. I know that that was one of the actors playing the characters that I was initially thinking, okay, like how is he going to work? But so far I don't have concerns with what I've seen. But then we also get a lot more of Princess Irulan. We see her interacting with the Bene Gesserit. And remember that Princess Irulan, she is trained as a Bene Gesserit sister. She may not be the most talented or have the most skills, but she's familiar with them. She's part of the organization. But her focus is more the fact that she's a princess. She's part of the royal family. She's the heir to the throne. So for her, the Bene Gesserit aspect isn't as much of a focus as it is, for example, for Jessica. And we have that conversation with Reverend Mother Mohayam, where basically she's talking about the Kwisatz Haderach and how this is an all-powerful being. And probably Irulan is starting to make more connections. And I wonder if this is going to lead to her later on thinking of, what if Paul Atreides is still alive, in connection to the prophet that they're hearing there. So yeah, definitely a lot going on Kaitain there. And then we also have a lot going on Giedi Prime in terms of Feyd. There have been certain new scenes, and I think some of them are pushing the PG-13 limit. Johnny, what are your thoughts there?
I don't know. I guess I'm a little biased. I really like Austin Butler as an actor, just from what the few projects I've seen him in so far. So really excited to see what he can offer in the world of Dune, because it's such a departure from something like Elvis, for example. And what we'd seen prior to this trailer, I was really liking. I think the design is interesting. Obviously, it's in line with the Harkonnen design overall that we've seen, with the pale skin and the hairless essentially. And there's that dark kind of it's an interesting aesthetic that they have on their world, and it seeps into, you know, their clothes and everything else. But in this trailer, we do get a little bit more insight to kind of the ceremonial aspects of what Feyd is going through. You know, fans of the book will be familiar with this and how it ties into the gladiator scene that has been highlighted and like the focal point of the Feyd footage up till now, and including this really, you could say, kind of provocative scene or moment where it looks like he's probably preparing to go into the arena, and he's being presented with these two almost like ceremonial like daggers or knives that he's going to use, and he takes one of the blades and like brings it up. He sticks his tongue out very slowly, and then like slowly brings the knife up to his tongue. And we don't really see the way it's edited. You don't get to see kind of how it plays out like in full. But we do see he kind of swings his arm out with the blade and seems to cut the neck or throat of a servant standing next to him. So he definitely has a cruel streak. We definitely see that he is, as Irulan says in this trailer, is psychotic. And also, I gotta say, we hadn't really seen too much of it in the previous footage and photos. But in that one shot where he slices the throat of the servant, I mean, Austin Butler is pretty jacked in this movie, actually. I know that he had talked about in an interview that he had been training with a Navy SEAL before he went over to Budapest and some of these other things. And it didn't seem like he was too noticeably bigger, you know, compared to like Elvis. But I mean, he's definitely pretty shredded up. Like his triceps and like everything else, his back is crazy popping. So he is a very nice contrast in every single way to Paul and Chalamet. And I think that's perfect in terms of being true to the book. So even though a lot of the little things are different, I think it's still true to the heart of that dynamic. And that kind of goes into a little bit more extra footage, some similar or same things in terms of the arena. I really loved the big long shot we get, almost like an establishing shot of the arena. It's enormous. We already knew that. You can't even see the full arena in this big long shot because we know there's like 10 tiers of seating and we can see like maybe 5 of them or something. But it just gives such a great sense of scale and Giedi Prime and just more kind of being immersed in their world. And then the other nice moment we get in terms of another look at Feyd-Rautha and also some of the architecture and designs is this huge cavernous like hall indoors on Giedi Prime, and it seems to be like there's this big like celebration, party, ceremony, whatever you want to call it, and it's actually very similar, almost I would say identical to what we've heard as the one of the opening moments of the film, where it sounds like there's a transfer of power on Arrakis, where the Baron is there and he basically ordains Raban as the new ruler of Arrakis, and Raban's wearing like a different outfit, and he has kind of like almost like a large chain around his neck or something like that, or necklace. And Feyd in this, you can see in the establishing shot, there's a stage at the far end of the room, and you can see, if you look really closely, the Baron is there, and he has the same machine, the suspensors he's kind of hanging on with, and then the closer shot of Feyd, you can see he's wearing the identical clothes. So there's a few different things this could be. It does seem like Feyd is getting the favor of the Baron, obviously, and that there seems to be maybe like a celebration going on because it seems like a pretty raucous crowd. So I'm excited to see more. And I'm curious, I suspect it's broken up, but just the way it's even put into the trailer, this could be just one big long Giedi Prime sequence potentially. We know that Leia Seydoux' character is going to be there, Margot Fennering, for the event, and so from him preparing with the blades and killing that servant up through the arena and that whole sequence, and then this after party kind of scene, there's a lot of Giedi Prime there, and I think that's great because we didn't get too much of it in the first movie. So as a book fan who wants to see a little bit more of these different worlds and a little bit different aesthetic, I think that's great. And again, Austin Butler, it's interesting. I hate to mention this, but I just think it makes me laugh. We haven't heard him talk yet, and I know everyone likes to like laugh about his voice and his Elvis voice, but I am curious to see if there's gonna be any difference really in like his intonation or just his cadence or anything. I'm sure it'll be pretty different. Batista in an interview mentioned that he sounded like a totally different person. So It's interesting they haven't shown anything yet, but I like that we're still having mysteries to answer whenever that may be.
I loved that establishing shot that you talked about with the gladiator arena is accurately triangle shaped. If I'm right, that is actually how Frank Herbert describes it. And so, again, another accurate detail. Thank you, Villeneuve. And also, whatever that scene that you were describing, Johnny, where there's a platform and there's just hundreds, if not thousands, of people on Giedi Prime cheering and whatever that might be, transfer of power, whatever that happens to be there. It did make me think of the Fenrings, and we don't see Tim Blake Nelson in this trailer, but I would like to believe that we have the Fenring couple in this story. I'm banking on that, but that'll be interesting because that's where that interaction takes place on Giedi Prime. In the capital city of Harco, that's where that happens, where there's that interaction and the scheming with the Fenrings. So, yeah, I'm really. I know we got a lot in this trailer, but I mean, there's so much more to this story. So I'm excited.
Real quick, Garin, to your point, I like that you mentioned the Fenrings a little bit more there. The way this trailer's edited, obviously, it's very deceptive, as all trailers can be. But with Dune, it's even like more meta because we know that visions are misleading and what you hear and see doesn't always make sense or makes sense in a different way later. When they're talking about how to respond to what's going on Arrakis, the Emperor says, send assassins. And then that is how they segue into Feyd. Obviously, Irulan says, Feyd-Rautha, like he's psychotic. I don't think necessarily that they're talking about Feyd because his capacity in the novel is not as an assassin. But things could be changed, things could be tweaked. I'm curious about that. I do wonder if Count Fenring, what his capacity in this, because we know he is he would have been the Kwisatz Haderach. So, and he's maybe arguably the most dangerous or one of the most dangerous in the story, at least in the first book. So, maybe he'll be involved and maybe he'll go on a mission or something. That could be interesting. We don't even know if Tim Blake Nelson is Count Fenring, but there's so much we don't know yet or haven't seen, and I love that, obviously. But yeah, that line in particular, those send assassins. Surely we have to see that, manifest in some way. What does that mean? That can't just mean more Harkonnen or more Sardaukar soldiers, right? If not, who would that be? Maybe Count Fenring could be an option for that, but we'll see.
I think it's a good theory, Johnny. Really good theory.
Yeah, and that's interesting that line from Irulan, like the part that he's psychotic, that likely is referring to Feyd, or it would make sense. It would be curious if she does have like any interaction, or because obviously she's aware of him and she's discussing him with somebody, and we know that in the mini series, the Dune mini series that was on TV in the 2000s, Irulan actually went to Giedi Prime and she had direct interaction with Feyd. So I wonder if there's going to be any homage to that, or if you're going to do any of that route there already. But it's good to see that even though these characters are not necessarily going to be in the same physical location, that there's going to be some thoughts about what type of person that is, and we're getting to learn about Feyd both from what we see but also from others' perspectives. Yeah, and I think also Johnny, that would make sense for that Giedi Prime scene to sort of be like all one segment, or maybe like intercut with something else. But you have Feyd, he goes into the arena, he fights Lieutenant Lanville, he wins, and then after that it's the celebration, and then the Baron is declaring that Feyd is his heir, and then it's a really big celebration, and then after that he interacts with Leia Seydoux. So I think that could be like one long experience on Giedi Prime. That definitely excited to see a lot more of that world.
Yeah, good point there, Marcus. And one thing that I did kind of occurred to me when I saw the trailer, after a few times anyway, was I think a lot of people thought or predicted that the introduction to Feyd, even before we got any trailers, the introduction to this character would be the gladiator scene, because it makes perfect sense, and in some ways that is kind of his reintroduction, at least in the novel. And so when you have that scene where the doors kind of open and he steps in, his face is shown, and he goes into the arena, seemingly that is not technically going to be the very first thing we see of Feyd in this movie. That would happen after the blade scene, most likely. So that could be the very first moment we get with the character. I'm curious again to see that whole thing play out and what it all means and how they choose to characterize this guy, and how again Austin Butler chooses to play him, because he described at, I think it was at CCXP just last week, as a delicious character, and he definitely is. And he's not a good guy by any stretch, and not someone that you want to see come out on top. But he is uh, a very intriguing antagonist for Paul. So I just hope that we get a good chunk. And I think there's really interesting, even that shot. I've watched it so many times now. The shot where you see him on the stage in that room or big hall. I feel like, and this is just my movie nerd brain like freaking out, and being a fan of Austin Butler and Villeneuve, I just feel like there's a lot of different like things you could take from his expression, like in that moment for some reason. I'm not sure what it is. Like his expression changes slightly, and it's kind of almost, it's like seems kind of ambiguous to me. I just wonder, like again, to the characterization of Feyd, like is he just going to be played as like a pure total psychopath, or is there going to be more under the surface? Sting, obviously, in the original was pretty. I think it would be fair to say maybe a little one note in that regard, just kind of like a live wire in his underwear. But I am curious, like how deep they go with Feyd, because he could be just a one note and a very easy to hate kind of villain. But yeah, I don't know. He does have elements that I feel like you could dig into and not necessarily get people to sympathize with him, but his position under the Baron is not an envious one necessarily.
One of the last scenes that I want to highlight is towards the end of the movie, and here we see in the trailer that Paul Atreides he re-encounters Reverend Mother Mohaim, and we know that in the first movie, of course, there was the test, determining if he's human, and the Reverend Mother was really in the position of power, at least at the beginning. And now we see that Paul, he's in total control of the voice, and he can silence one of the most senior Bene Gesserit. So that's really excited to see how they're using the voice there, and I'm sure we'll get to see a bit more of Paul's other powers as well.
You guys, I really like how we're seeing in this trailer this evolution of Paul that Villeneuve had to kind of tell Chalamet to contain in part one. I remember that I read that, or we brought that up in one of our shows, that Chalamet read the book in preparation for shooting part one, and Villeneuve had to keep telling him, no, this is not the Paul at the end of the story that is so powerful and bold and commanding, and this is the young guy who's just barely understanding his place in the world, and this, we've the decision to include the sequences in this trailer very, very much show this powerful leader, and he's coming into his own and recognizing that he really has a long reach. And yet then we have that shot with he and Chani that's very tender and establishing that they're falling in love and that relationship. So anyway, just my kids, they're all young adults, and Chalamet is the best actor ever to them, and I really think that he's going to have the opportunity to really display the depth of Paul, and I just like that we're seeing glimpses of this, but just because you've got to believe that this young person who has a prescient ability but doesn't really understand how to use it yet becomes the leader of thousands of Fremen, and not only the culture of the Fremen, which is very important, which we'll see, but also a military leader, and all of that has got to be believable. And so I think, like my kids, I'm excited to see Chalamet really display his skill with this character.
Yeah, I like what you said there, Garin. I think it is very satisfying to watch this character go from being just this teenage boy and I guess technically he still is supposed to be a teenage boy in this movie, but in the first one he looks so young, and he does play himself as a very young novice, kind of up and coming. He's the son to his father and his mother, and his father's not even in this one. And a lot of his mentors, looking at Duncan, for example, and through Fear, who's MIA at the moment. So I think it's such a night and day difference. And everything I've seen, I was very curious to see how is Chalamet going to play this, because we've not seen him play anything exactly like that before. But I thought that everything that we've seen so far, including the moment that Marcus highlighted, which is just such a great uh, turn of the tables there with those two. And I like seeing more of Mahayam in this as well, because I think people can forget about her despite being in such a pivotal early scene in this saga. I think Chalamet is just knocking out of the park and is doing a very convincing job of being commanding, being like intimidating. And I think that as the movie goes on, of course, we're going to see that evolve even further. But also one thing I was thinking about this earlier today, and hearing you talk about those elements reminded me of it. It's going to be so satisfying, and I'll use Austin Butler's delicious to go back, and for book fans, but also I think even more probably for people that haven't read the book, aren't as familiar with the lore, or maybe previous adaptations or anything like that, to after watching part two, to go back and watch part one. And there's going to be so many things that have such a great payoff in the second film, and images and messages from the deep in part one that, watching it, you might not be able to really understand or grasp what's going on. You have a lot of questions. Even as a book reader, I did, watching the first film. And to see some of these things come to fruition, or maybe some things that, seemed a certain way, like I said earlier, and then they end up happening a different way. I think that's just going to be so cool. It's kind of like when a movie has a twist and then you go back and watch it the second time and you realize, oh, there's all these different clues, and or if it's a mystery, there's all these different clues that make sense and make it more satisfying to watch. I think this is going to be similar, but it's going to be for different reasons, and it's going to be across two movies, obviously, at least until we get Dune Messiah, which will add a whole nother layer of messages and different meanings and things you can take away from it. So I think that for me is going to be one of the great things about this duology, and then the trilogy will be just how well orchestrated and this tapestry is going to be designed by Villeneuve and the team.
Only if Frank Herbert could see this. I think he would be so proud, and I'd like to believe that his son and his grandson and his family that run the estate. I really think he would be so proud, and he was admittedly so supportive of Lynch's Dune, and even said some really positive things about it, and that was very kind of him, and again, at the time it really was a great manifestation of that story. But I can just only imagine what Frank Herbert would be feeling to see this. He probably wouldn't agree with everything, knowing his personality. He would,
no way.
He would maybe have issue with all of the epic war movie stuff. He really might, because he was a very complex individual. But to see his story come to life in such a way that is so engrossing and almost overwhelming, I think he would truly be appreciative and grateful for that. I'd like to believe that anyway.
Agreed.
And we've just picked through, a couple of the most noteworthy new scenes in the trailer, but we could take any of these characters and spend an hour analyzing their behavior and what's going on here, and tying it back to the book and what we've learned. And in fact, we have done that before with various characters. And one of the lines from Chani that we got some more context on is, "This is how they enslave us." We first heard that line in the earlier trailer, but it was out of context, so we didn't realize. But here we know that she's saying to all the Fremen as they're bowing down to Paul Muad'Dib, and she's daring to stand up and challenge all of them, the prophecy, because she knows Paul more closely and who he really is. So that's really fascinating scene. Like I think Chani, I'm also like really excited to see how that character comes, and that tension that happens, because she loves Paul, but then she's also seems to really hate the prophecy and what it's doing to her people. So there's going to be that duality there. It's going to be fascinating to see.
Hey, one more concern that just came to me: making sure that that Villeneuve honors the role of the women characters in this story. Very powerful, influential, commanding women, and the very very last scene of the book, right? Which I won't say what it is, but I really hope, and it reminded me when you were talking about that scene where Chani's, in front of all the Fremen and the siege, talking about, that this prophecy is holding us down. I hope that throughout this story, those women characters are as strong as I think Frank Herbert wanted them to be in his story. Obviously, we had the Liet Kynes gender swap, which I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was a great choice. But I hope that uh, representation of Irulan, of Chani, even Reverend Mother Gaius Mohayim. I mean, even just making sure that those key characters, Lady Fenring, really have the right place and the weight in the story, because that was really important to Frank Herbert, and I think I'd like to believe Villeneuve would be very conscious of that.
Yeah, in fact, that's something that he has said in a recent interview, that he wanted to intentionally focus on the women characters, but especially the Bene Gesserit, and they got more attention in this, and maybe the Mentans less so. So where's two for Howard?
Yeah, I think I was just about to say that, Marcus. He actually just said something almost verbatim like that in that interview recently, which is a good sign, I would say, Garin. But yeah, I think, Chani, seeing that we don't have the full context of it, obviously, but that quote and that line, I mean, just seeing even the shot, the way it's composed and framed, it's so striking because she is like standing above like all the Fremen and like standing out and saying and pointing, and she rips her like hood off and like storms out. Yeah, it's gonna be very interesting. And I think I have seen and heard a little bit of concern and kind of questions about like, okay, this is not like the book, obviously. This is pretty different. And I'm excited. I do need to I need to get a move on with reading the book before this movie comes out. But I think it's very intriguing, very exciting to me, because if it's done well, and historically Villeneuve has done a pretty good job with his women characters, I think that it'll make for a very intriguing dynamic and relationship between Paul and Chani. Because I don't think it's going to be so drastic that like the relationship like isn't what it is in the book necessarily, but I think that having some sort of rift or some sort of conflict, whatever it may be, because we don't have all the context, it could be very very interesting, and make Chani as a character, again, I've said this many times before, but add some extra wrinkles to that character that aren't in the book necessarily. And similarly with Irulan, because she seems to be much more involved and maybe have a more like kind of fleshed out subplot practically in this movie based on what we've seen and heard so far. And Lady Jessica looks, we haven't even touched on her, I'll just mention, but she looks incredible in this trailer in the Reverend Mother essentially attire, and seems to be having a very significant role in the context of the narrative, as we all know. So I think it's gonna be great. I mean, obviously it is, but I like that you said that, Garin, because I think that this trailer, especially, and having Mohaim included in it in those few instances, yeah, there's a lot of love and characters to go around, but so far so good from my point of view.
We didn't even have a chance to touch on every detail. So as mentioned, we're going to be doing a full spoiler breakdown that's going to be coming up on the show soon as well. But yeah, for today, let's go ahead and wrap up on that note. Go ahead and sign off.
Thanks everyone once again for joining us. Appreciate you taking some time to hear our thoughts on the trailer. It's just one of those exciting times. We're getting into that, like I said, not quite the home stretch, but we're getting into the stretch, and it feels great having this trailer out, being able to discuss it with the team here and appreciate all your support. You can find me on social media, Twitter, Letterboxd at Johnny Stobcheck, and stick around because next couple of months, 2.5 months, are going to be really fun, I suspect.
Hey, thanks for joining us. This is getting pretty exciting, and over the next couple of months, it's going to get pretty crazy. So thanks for supporting us. I just want to mention the fact that it's kind of an epic moment. We have gone through this whole episode and not mentioned Aaliyah, which is really important, but we did not talk about her at all. We'll talk about her next time. Don't worry. But thank you for your support.
Yeah, this was Marcus Gabriel. You can find me at Marcus's Writing on various social media platforms and writing on dunesnet.com. So as mentioned, a lot of exciting stuff still to come here on the show. We also have some collaborations coming up, some more special guests, interviews, so a lot to look forward to. It's going to be a big lead up to the movie, and 2024, it's going to be the year of Dune, so tons to look forward. For now, take care.
We hope you've enjoyed Dune Talk. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when the next episode drops. Stay tuned to DuneNewsNet.com and add us to your social feeds. Be the first to hear breaking news and reviews.